It's every 4 days a woman is killed at the moment in 2024, which is just awful. When you were actually at Bondi when it happened. As a woman with a team full of women, how can I make my team feel more safe coming to work? It really made me realise that there's a really fundamental human right, and that is to feel safe.
It was normal in one of my jobs for people to be openly crying at their desk. It baffles me. I can laugh about it now, but at the time, it's not funny. We are not saving lives. We're in marketing.
I think being empathetic is probably one of the greatest traits a leader should have and can have. I used to really shy away from having difficult conversations because very early on in my career, I would get very emotionally invested.
Everyone knows Duolingo kills it on content. The character in the Duolingo parrot is so powerful.
When people hire us to create their content for them, whether it's on LinkedIn, TikTok or Instagram, I think some clients think that there's this element of it'll just be created. And it's well, we don't do your job. I don't have enough time to create content across all channels. Which do you think are the most worthwhile to spend time on?
This is a great question. If you are looking to gain followers, now I think it's more about...
Welcome back to Top of Mind. Today we are doing another Q&A episode. You guys seem to be loving our Q&A episodes, so we're going to continue to bring you more questions and answers. I'm joined by the lovely Laura.
Hello.
Hello. Laura works with me at Gambit Collective. She's our social media account manager. Now, these episodes, if you haven't listened to an episode before, are designed to answer your questions. It came about from the idea that we had a lot of questions coming into our DMs, to our emails, in client meetings, etc. And I thought if one person has a question like this, then the likelihood that there'll be others out there with the same question or similar question. So why don't we make episodes out of it so that we can help as many people as possible. Now, before we get into the 5 questions that we're going to answer today, if you have a question that you would like answered and you are listening on Spotify, you can use the Q&A function to leave a question. If you're listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment there. We've seen lots of comments coming through on YouTube, which is really exciting. Alternatively, you can send us a DM at topofmind.pod on Instagram or send us an email, either hello@topofmindpod.com or my personal email, which is hayley@gambitcollective.com.au. Laura, are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Ready as I'll ever
We've got 5 questions and we're going to kick us off with the first question. How can I create a lot of content efficiently?
I love this question because it means that A, you're thinking about creating content, which I love. You need to. And B, who doesn't love efficiency? We love an efficient queen or king. Let's see. So the top tips I have is it depends on what type of content you're looking to create. Obviously, if you're looking to create higher production value content, that's a different story. But what we do with our clients is sometimes we will batch create content. So that's really an efficient way of getting 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, 3 months worth of content done in a short period of time. So we have clients, for example, that book us to come shoot 2-3 hours worth of content, and that's them set for the next couple of months. Now, the only thing I would say is you can't go into this blindly. You need to have a strategy, have a list of what type of content you need to create. So that goes back to having a content strategy first. That's your first step before you can start batch creating content. And also on top of that, if you're looking to create more kind of ad hoc content throughout the week or throughout your day, set up your phone, do what you normally do, whether that's working on a laptop or packing orders in a warehouse, and record that content and put text over the top, a trending audio, and that is such an easy way to get short snippets of content. I'm not saying that should be everything that you're putting out, but it's a good way to work efficiently.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only thing that I would add to that is when it comes to efficiencies, I mean, I know firsthand that I'm extremely time poor when it comes to creating content. It's half the reason that we started the podcast, because it allows me to create a lot of content or long form content that then can be cut down into short snippets. But one thing that I've really kind of lent into in the last few months is identifying the things that I know that I'm going to do every week, which I can then create content from. One of those things is obviously the podcast. So I know every Wednesday morning across my LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok, the trailer goes out. I know that that's a piece of content that I can create. I know that, on Mondays, I know that, we probably have a couple of episodes coming up. So it's like, how can I tie my piece of content into that episode that's coming up or something that we've done with work? And I think personally, 9 times out of 10, I'm either getting ready to go somewhere or I'm getting, dressed or I'm writing a whole heap of stuff on my computer. So it's like being able to record content that's easy that I can do whilst I'm getting ready or whilst I'm putting my makeup on or whilst I'm doing my hair.
Whilst you're at the gym.
Whilst
we
I'm
love
at
your
the
gym content.
Totally. So it's like being able to capture that really quickly and put that out is something that has made my content more efficient as well in terms of being able to identify the things that I do every week that work for me. And I think I heard it actually, Alex Earle spoke about it at South by Southwest this year. She said that her content came about and the reason why it's so consistent is because she gets ready for all of these events and she's always doing her makeup. And so she's like, that's the time that I have time to speak to my audience and create content. So she's like, I will always do a get ready with me as like a non-negotiable. And then she will always do like an outfit reveal because she'll always have a different outfit going to these different events. So being able to identify those key pieces of content that you can consistently create quite effortlessly also help with efficiencies. If you love this episode, help us to grow and reach more people by hitting the subscribe button and leaving a review.
The other thing I'd say with efficiency is it doesn't have to be perfect. If you want something to be perfect, that's going to cut down the amount that you're posting and the amount you're getting out and perhaps how much time you're spending on editing as well. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
That's not efficient to make every single piece of content perfect that you're sending out.
I agree. And I've recently, whenever I made that deal with Lexi I made a deal with one of my team members that if she could show up on LinkedIn once a week, that I would post on TikTok every day. Well, it originally started with a few times a week, but I am very competitive and was like, you know what? I'll raise you one and I'll go every day. And I think that really took the fear out of like making sure that my content was perfect. Just posting every day and ensuring that I got something out every day that tied to kind of what I was doing or what I was working on or where I was in the world. Really took the fear out of that. So I think kind of turning up consistently also helps with efficiencies when you're like learning what works, what doesn't work, what performs, what doesn't perform, what people want to see, what people don't want to see as well. So I think that for me has kind of helped. Done 100%. Is better than perfect.
It is. We're learning this. We are learning this. So this is a great question. Whoever sent this in, I love it because they're also trying to be efficient here. Cost efficient. What is some marketing you can do for free? I struggle with this question because there's so much that you can do. But I think the first thing that you need to do when it comes to finding marketing solutions for you that work for free is being really clear on the audience and the objective that you want out of it. Like, it's all well and good doing like a guerrilla marketing campaign where, for those of you that don't know what a guerrilla marketing campaign is, where it's essentially kind of a pop-up or an unplanned, so to speak, campaign where you might, turn up at a cricket match or you might turn up at Pitt Street Mall and there's been no permits or anything like that. It's just kind of turned up and presented, your campaign or your brand or whatever in a particular way. So it's all well and good doing a guerrilla marketing campaign, but if where you're doing it isn't the type of people that you want to be talking to, then it's kind of effort wasted. So I think one thing that people get really caught up on, doing things for free is making sure that you are speaking to the right people or you're communicating in a way that aligns to your brand value or purpose. If I'm thinking about it, like if I wanted to market the podcast, for example, for free, I would, and I think we're actually going to look at doing this, so you get this scoop for free. We've got, like the cardboard signs where people are holding up the cardboard signs, they've taken the internet by storm. They're on every social media channel where there's someone holding up a cardboard sign in a busy crowd saying something either funny, thought-provoking, whatever it is.
And I think I would do that in like Pitt Street Mall or like down George Street near our offices, because they're the people that I want to be talking to, like people that are looking at growing their personal brands, people looking to using marketing and social media to grow their businesses or the brands. So I'd be really clear on who I'm wanting to talk to, and then get really creative on how you're going to execute that and what resources do you already have available to you that you can leverage, you know, for that. And content's such a good example of that. Everyone has an iPhone. Mm-hmm. Everyone can create content. Everyone can put content out on Instagram, TikTok for free. So I would say that content is probably the first place that I would start.
100%.
You know, there are so many brands and businesses and personal brands that have built themselves up by being great at executing content. Now, they might not be the expert in the room. They might not be, you know, the smartest, you know, most intelligent person in that space, but they're the ones that are turning up consistently with their content, and people feel as though they know, like, and trust them. So I think as a brand or as an individual, when it comes to marketing for free, being able to not only be really clear with your objective and your audience, but being really kind of solid on the action that you want people to take off the back of it. You know, what is this marketing effort driving? Are you asking people to subscribe to your podcast? If you've not already subscribe.
Click subscribe.
If you're asking people to subscribe to your podcast, if you're asking people to listen, if you're asking people to follow you, whatever it is, be really clear with the outcome that you want from that effort. And I think, the first place I would look when it comes to free marketing is being really consistent with your content.
And I think I would add to that as well. It may sound strange as someone who works in social media, but never underestimate the old-fashioned good old word of mouth. Have a good product, tell people about it, they'll tell people about it, give your customers a good experience. That is free. If you're doing that well, word of mouth will spread. And then, obviously a good content strategy as well.
I think it goes without saying as well, when you're talking about word of mouth, yes, that works from a product-based business, but it also works from a business to business, right? Or like a service-based business. And I think getting your customers or your current clients or whatever to refer you to other clients, if you do good work, they're going to know other people that are going to need your help. And we've seen that with the business. You know, when people are enjoying the work that we're doing, they refer us to other people. And I think that that's a really nice kind of space to be in when, you know, if you focus on delivering a great product or a great service, you know, that marketing will generally do the work for you.
It's way more powerful. You trust people, you trust your friends, you trust your family to say, hey, go and use Hayley, go and buy this product because I love it.
On word of mouth, though, I think it's really interesting because, like you just said, you know, you trust people, but, you know, there's a study recently that shows that 80% of internet users trust online search more than they trust people.
Yeah, you've got to back it up.
You've got to back it up. I think it's really important that, like, if you're giving someone a restaurant recommendation and you're like, hey, you should go here, and then I look that restaurant up on Instagram and there's nothing on there, I'm going to be skeptical and I'm going to form my opinion based on what I've seen online, not on what someone has recommended me. So I think there is that element of being able to continually create content to back up what people are saying about you in the real world.
100%.
Amazing. Next question. I don't have enough time to create content across all channels. Which do you think are the most worthwhile to spend time on?
This is a great question. I think we touched on it a little bit in our last Q&A episode, but you need to be showing up. TikTok is not going to be useful for you if you have an audience that's not on TikTok. Yeah. So firstly, identify where those people are and where your audience is, and then identify, okay, these are the channels my audience are. These are the priorities that I need to be creating content for. And then in terms of not having enough time, think about how you can use one piece of content in multiple ways. And either you use that across one video, for example, across multiple channels, or if it doesn't suit every single channel, you adapt it in some way. So instead of a video, it might be you're still showing a behind the scenes of a podcast recording, but maybe it's photos in a carousel. Think about how you can work smarter, not harder, and use one occasion or what might be seen as one piece of content multiple times.
Yeah, and I think with that, what we really try and emphasize with our clients is start on one channel and do one channel well before you then start doing, like if I went in and was like, right, I'm going to do LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and then I'm also going to try YouTube and Twitter or X or whatever the name is now that they've changed it to. X. Never call it X. It's always Twitter. But I think be really clear on the type of channel that works for you, not only from an audience point of view, as you said, but also from a type of content that you're producing point of view, right? If you're not producing any video content, being on TikTok is going to be really hard to be consistent. So I think being able to identify a channel that works for you based on not only where your audience is, but also the type of content that you're creating, and work on nailing one channel well. Like before I was on LinkedIn, Instagram was my main channel. I did that for 10 plus years, built my following up on Instagram. And then as I kind of entered the workforce, I started dabbling in LinkedIn and was like, how can this content copy across or work for a platform like LinkedIn? I think one of the biggest mistakes we see clients making is just having this spray approach of using the same content across every single channel, which is never going to work because the content needs to be created specifically for that channel. Now, I see it quite a bit, like, you know, even with this podcast, for example, if you go onto TikTok, the trailers, they're great, but they're not getting a huge amount of cut through in terms of eyeballs or engagement or anything like that. They work really well on Instagram, but they don't work as well. The same content doesn't work as well on TikTok. So we've kind of continued to post the trailers and the snippets onto TikTok, but we're also then generating a whole heap of kind of user-generated content, you know, from us and the team that is actually, like, we posted one video last week or this week, and I think that in itself is like 5 times the amount of views that any of the other pieces of content got. So I think being really clear with what works on each channel and what doesn't is really important when it comes to, I suppose, committing to a channel.
100%. I think you have to train your brain to think in content, which isn't easy. I mean, we do it because that's what we do every day. That's what we do for work. Everything is content in our eyes, and our eyes light up as soon as we see something that we're like, oh, we can create content from this.
Yeah.
But take, for example, this one podcast. We can think of, I'd say, 10, 15, 20 pieces of content that can come from one half-hour podcast. So it's just about thinking before you go into any event, any recording, anything that you're doing. Think about, okay, where is this going to go and how can I set myself up before that starts to be able to apply that to each content strategy or each platform?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that conversation around efficiency as well, right? Like for me, making sure that my week isn't jam-packed. Like yesterday, 8 a.m. till 4 p.m., I was in meetings. It's like there is no way other than me recording, me sitting on Zooms and things like that, that I can create content in that. So allowing time to create content as well and setting aside time to, you know, I always have a half-hour meeting in my diary every single morning, Monday to Thursday, to post on LinkedIn. It gives me half an hour to post on LinkedIn or consume content so that I can post it. So I think allowing yourself time to actually, you know, think about what you want to share, think about how you want to communicate it, think about the type of content that you want to share. And if you don't have the time, hire somebody that does.
And I think it comes down to needing to prioritize it. I mean, we put a half-hour TikTok filming meeting in your diary every week.
You do.
And I'm sure you have things way more important to do, but you prioritize it and you make time because you know how important it is to create content for the business.
Yeah, and I say it to you guys all the time, right? Like creating content for the business is just as important as creating content for our clients. Like our clients don't see what we do if we don't create content. So I think I've been really lucky with the business in the sense that the content that we have created and that I have created across my own personal brand and the business page has actually led to more clients. So it's like, why would we stop doing something that works just because we're more successful and we're getting more clients coming through the door?
I think I had someone say to me the other day, oh, your job looks like so much fun. It looks like you just post like fun, stupid. They didn't mean it in an offensive way, but like stupid, fun little TikToks all the time. I'm like, of course, because that's what you see online. Yeah. I do work. I do create content for our clients. I do other things. But that is presenting to my friends, our clients, anyone who might potentially work with us, a little bit of personality, a little bit of who we are as a business, who we are as a brand, who we are as people. And it's memorable because they go, oh, wow, they have fun, or they understand this trend, or we have so many people message us and go, oh, by the way, I love your content.
Yeah.
Because it's something fun.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of a quote that I actually shared on my Instagram story last night. I quickly looked on my phone and it says, the work everyone sees is the result of the work no one sees. And I think that that's so important, and it's really, really relevant when it comes to content is like, you know, yes, you're creating content that highlights a specific brand message or, you know, talking to a particular pillar within the business or the organization or the service or the product. But there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes. And I think that, you know, I think one of the mistakes a lot of our clients have made in the past is thinking that they could hire a content team and they can just kind of dust their hands off it. And I think, you know, whilst I use this podcast as an example, whilst we have a production team and a team that edits it and things like that, it still comes to me to review and timestamp the snippets that I want and, you know, review all of those things before it then goes back to the editor for them to do the work. So when you outsource things, you'll never be able to fully outsource things if you're a business owner or a leader. And so I think having an element of responsibility or accountability when it comes to outsourcing, being like, yes, I'm still going to have to play a role, but the majority of the heavy lifting is going to be done by somebody else. So I think there's a big misconception that when you do hire somebody to help you with that, you know, when people hire us to create their content for them, whether it's on LinkedIn, TikTok or Instagram, I think some clients think that there's this element of like, oh, it'll just be created. And it's like, well, we don't do your job. We are not an expert in the space. We don't walk in your shoes every day, but we can create a whole heap of content if we sit with you for half an hour and understand what it is that you do and how you do it and what things you're seeing in your, you know, line of work or industry or team. So I think, yeah, that's probably one of the bigger misconceptions when it comes to creating content, whether it's efficiently or kind of across all channels. Hey guys, if you are listening on Spotify, do not forget to give us a 5-star rating. It will help us to reach more people.
Oh, is this my question? Honestly, I think we had this conversation. We have this conversation often, actually. Hayley, you seem like a great leader. She is, just confirming. How do you get good at having difficult conversations?
I used to really shy away from having difficult conversations because very early on in my career, I would get very emotionally invested in conversations, and I'd actually probably most conversations that were difficult, I'd end up crying because and I can laugh at it now because I was so emotionally invested in, you know, wanting an outcome, wanting people to see me, you know, do a good job and excel in my career and all of those things that come with, you know, working your way through, you know, your first few years in a workplace. I think one of the biggest things that I realized that kind of really changed the way in which I think about having difficult conversations is that I can have an opinion or an experience and you can have an opinion and experience. And if we're having a conversation around something that is causing tension or discomfort or whatever, no one has to walk away from that situation as one person being right and one person being wrong. You can both be right in your own experience because it's your own experience. So I think being comfortable with the idea that you can walk away from a conversation not having to prove someone right or wrong makes having a difficult conversation a lot easier, because at the end of the day, I don't see it now as something that I'm trying to prove my point or trying to convince or change somebody's mind about what they're saying about me or, you know, what the conversation is about. I'm instead just trying to understand their side of things so that I can kind of better process the conversation that is happening or is going on. And I think that obviously comes through a lot of experience and kind of experiencing a lot of really shitty conversations and, you know, shitty management and, you know, shitty styles of leading people and all of that. But I think that for me, there's a really nice, I love the idea of the fact that there's a conversation that creates tension, because I think that if we were all the same, we would be really boring. And so I think that in life there is going to have to be difficult conversations that you are going to have. So the more comfortable you can get with those uncomfortable conversations, the easier your life will be. And I think it goes without saying, when you grow a team and you have a team underneath you that are looking to you as to how you act or how you hold yourself in an uncomfortable conversation or a difficult conversation, I think it's really, really important to expose, especially people that don't have as much experience in that space as you perhaps might, expose people to those difficult conversations. And that might not be forcing them to have the difficult conversation, but it might just be involving them in that conversation that you're having. So say, for example, a client has come to me and they've said, oh, look, I wasn't really happy with how X, Y, and Z work. Overall, we're really happy, but X, Y, and Z is something that we probably need to work on in the future. I wouldn't take myself off to a meeting room and have that conversation with that client privately. I would sit in the office and have that conversation amongst my team, because I think the more we can expose other people perhaps don't have that experience to these difficult conversations, the more that they can learn in terms of how you've done it, the more they can learn that they don't have to be emotionally charged, the more that they can learn that having uncomfortable and sometimes confronting conversations is a part of life and work, and that they're not kind of scary things to be a part of. I think leading from the kind of top down and showing people how it should be done instead of kind of forcing people into uncomfortable situations is probably the best way that I kind of get better at having those difficult conversations. I also think having and being open to feedback, I think, is such an important thing. It's something that I ask you guys regularly in the team is like, can I be doing anything better for you guys? Is there something that you guys want to see more of? I mean, even recently with, the increase in, violence, and attacks and, domestic violence increases and, the conversation about, I think it's every 4 days a woman is killed at the moment in 2024, which is
terrifying,
just awful. I really put my hat on of like, as a woman with a team full of women, what can I be doing as a boss, as a leader, as somebody that does have control over their workplace and the way in which we do work? How can I make my team feel better, more empowered, more comfortable, more safe coming to work? And we had the conversation around messaging when you're on the way into work and when you're on the way home from work. A lot of us live on our own. So I think, they're not nice conversations to have, but I think that if you can come to the conversation with a sense of empathy, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, you live on your own, I live on my own, or you live with housemates, but, no one's going to be sitting there being like, is Laura home yet? Mm-hmm. So I think being that person that can say, message me when you get home, message me when you're on your way in. If you feel like traveling to work outside of the commuting hours because it's less busy and you feel more safe on a bus or a train when it's less busy, do that. And obviously a number of other like initiatives and things like that we're trialing within the organisation. But I always come back to the saying that like if it was easy, everyone would do it. And I think sometimes the right thing to do isn't always the easiest thing to do. And I think coming back to the idea around having difficult conversations, they're not easy, but the more that you engage with them, the more that you go into those conversations with empathy and compassion and an understanding that you don't have to prove your point, you just have to try and understand the other person's point, the easier those difficult conversations become.
Completely. And I think touching on that, I actually had a conversation with a friend after we had that meeting about kind of safety and feeling safe at work, coming to and from work. And we were both shocked, which says something that having that difficult conversation, which isn't super comfortable, but it's important, is rare. Other people are shying away from that type of thing. The fact that we were like, wow, Hayley's doing this. It's not rocket science. It's not revolutionary. It's awesome, but other people aren't doing it. So it seemed so out of left field that we were like, wow, that's really important. And for you to sit down, think about that, sit us down, have a conversation where you probably didn't know how we were going to react or how we felt about it, or if we'd had any kind of personal connections. Like, that's a difficult conversation to bring up, but the impact of it and now having an understanding of where we sit is so much more impactful.
And I think you're right. I think with difficult conversations, I think it comes back to the idea of what's more difficult. Like, I would struggle so much more losing a team member because she didn't feel like she could come into work. So she decided to just work from home and freelance because I didn't offer her a solution to make her feel safe. That would be a harder pill to swallow for me than having a difficult conversation about the policies and, you know, initiatives that we're going to be launching within the business. And I think for context for anybody listening, I had a conversation with my team not long after the Bondi Junction Westfield incident, which was tragic and awful, and you were actually at Bondi when it happened. And it really made me realise that, you know, whilst we are in a privileged location in Sydney and, you know, there's a lot worse things happening in the world when you look at it and perspective, you know, there's a really fundamental human right, and that is to feel safe, you know, whether you're at home, whether you're at work. And I think, you know, one of the reasons why I started the business was because I wanted to create an environment where females, but also, you know, anybody that worked in our space felt so safe enough to kind of bring up a conversation that, you know, perhaps they haven't felt safe bringing up before, or safe enough to ask the questions that perhaps they haven't asked before. And for me, it wasn't even, you know, there was no second thought around various initiatives that we were going to implement in the business around messaging to and from work. You know, I'm on my way in, I've got home, you know, it's a simple text. It doesn't take very long. But it just not only ensures that, you know, you feel safe, but we can kind of create this environment amongst the girls in the team that everybody feels, you know, safe and part of, you know, this
looking out for each other.
Yeah, community that they're part of. And I think, you know, the next thing was obviously using the business Uber account, you know, if you did feel unsafe whenever. Like, it's not just a matter of when you're at work. If you feel unsafe at any point, use the business Uber account to get in and get out of wherever you are. Because I've realised that so many people choose to take public transport because it is cheaper, but it's not necessarily the safer option. So that's something that's really important. You know, we're looking at doing self-defence classes, which seem very kind of trivial, I think, and I kind of did toy with the idea of not doing it, but I think that as a team outing or a team kind of bonding experience, just being equipped with just some kind of basic knowledge or intel in terms of what you can do if you are put in a situation where you are vulnerable is really important. So I think, yeah, having those difficult conversations really come easy to me when I know that, on the other hand, dealing with the repercussions of not having those conversations will be a far harder pill to swallow.
And I just want to go back as well to what you were saying about kind of having difficult conversations. This is something that I'm working on at the moment, whether that's kind of conversations with clients or with team members or managing people. But I think it's because, I was probably too emotionally charged in the past, where it's not because I'm kind of super emotional or unstable, it's because I care. I care about delivering my best work. I care about what people think about me, that type of thing.
You also spend a lot of time at work, and I think that that's something that, like, you spend a third of your life at work, which not only is the argument for making sure that where you work is somewhere that you want to spend a lot of your time, but it's the argument for, like, when you invest a third of your life into anything, you're going to be emotionally invested in it regardless.
Hopefully.
So I think it's really valid. Like, it's really valid.
I think if you're not, are you in the right job? Like, if you don't care about your job. But the other thing is, being in agencies or in other businesses where perhaps the management style was different, let's just say, the closed door conversations do not help. No. Because I'm not learning how to handle the difficult conversation if something's happened with a client or another team member or something's happened, that is being dealt with offline, and perhaps that conversation of how that went down isn't even being communicated to me. So then you think about what's been said, I've done something wrong. You're kind of sitting off in a corner while this is being dealt with somewhere else. So you're not learning how to deal with it yourself. But so watching you deal with these conversations and being in the office instead of going into a meeting room is so helpful. Or having a manager that you can go to and say, hey, this is a situation. How would you deal with this? Or do you mind helping me? This is what I think, but can you help me get to a better solution? But I think one thing we got told, which is kind of ironic because it was usually when people were crying or something. It was normal in one of my jobs for people to be openly crying at their desk.
I can't.
Yeah. Like, it baffles me. Like, I can laugh about it now, but at the time, not funny. It's PR, not ER.
Yeah.
We are not saving lives. We're in marketing. Yes, we want to do a good job. Yes, we're going to deliver amazing results for our clients. But at the end of the day, I have friends who are police, paramedics, ambulance, working with babies or preemie babies. Their job is life and death. And the things that they deal with at work compared to sometimes what I deal with at work, it's marketing. We're not saving lives. And sometimes you need to bring that to the forefront of the conversation. Do the best you can to understand the other person, to explain your position, come to a solution, and then not take it home with you because we're not saving lives.
Yeah, I think the last thing that I'll add on that is like one of the really important things or kind of pieces of advice that I learned around being emotional. I think one thing that I really struggled when I started my business was like, oh, you have to be very masculine, like no emotion, no tears, no like don't look like you care about anything, right? Like you have to come in, you've got to be a force to be reckoned with. And I think slowly over the last 3.5 years, like I've learned that I can be empathetic. I can sit with a team member and, you know, be upset with her when she's going through a breakup or she's going through problems or, you know, feel how they're feeling. I think being empathetic is probably one of the greatest traits a leader should have and can have, because I think that at the end of the day, especially when you're dealing with people, you know, as you said before, people resonate with other people. But I think when it comes to the emotion side of things, you know, I'll never make a decision with emotion. Like I take the emotion right out of it and I look at the facts. But dealing with people and everyday problems and problems that arise, you know, embracing empathy and compassion when it comes to dealing with those problems is really, really important. And I think one of the greatest examples I ever got given, and I literally tell this to anyone who will listen, is, you know, you have two colleagues that turn up to work. This is a scenario. Two colleagues, you know, that you work with. One that doesn't turn up to work because they've called in sick. The other also didn't turn up to work because they've called in sick. Now, one person you really like, you get along with, maybe you've had a drink with outside of work. One person you don't really get along with, you know that they've said a few things about you behind your back. You're like, we're acquaintances at work and that's all we'll be, right? The way in which you react to those two situations is so vastly different. You know, the person that you like, you're like, oh, poor thing, she's so overworked or he's so overworked, like they probably need a break. The other conversation with the person that you don't like is like, oh, they always leave the work to me, like they're so lazy, blah, blah, blah. Like they've probably just, you know, been hungover or whatever. And yet if you look at the problem for what it is, you take away the people from that problem. The problem is that both of them are not there because they've both called in sick. So I think that being able to remove people or emotion from a decision is really important and see the facts for what it is. I think having emotion when it comes to dealing with people is really important, with empathy and compassion and being able to understand where someone is coming from. But I think when it comes to making a decision, removing that emotion is really important.
I'm laughing because I had that situation happen to me where I'd called in sick.
Yeah.
Genuinely so sick for a week. I think it was the worst flu I've ever had. The manager, which then created so much distrust between me and my manager. The manager was walking around telling 6, 7, 8 people, Laura's not sick, she's going to quit, call her, make sure she's actually sick, make sure she's at home, make sure she's not traveling.
Stop.
And I had someone call me and say, hey, I know you're really sick because we've been talking, we're friends.
Yeah.
I know you're down and out, but this is what's being said. And I went into the office the next day, got halfway there, had to turn around and come home because I was so sick. And then to the manager, I was like, I'm never trusting you again.
Yeah.
If this is how you're approaching the situation.
Yeah.
No empathy.
Yeah. It's disgusting. It's funny. Anyway, last question. I feel like we could talk on that topic for ages. Last question. How to get ahead of the Instagram algorithm to gain followers?
The algorithm.
The algorithm.
The algorithm. It's this mysterious little thing that as soon as you figure out how to work with it, it changes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can work with it and it works really great. Other times you have no idea what it's doing.
Yeah.
But gaining followers, I would not focus on so much. I think back in the day, it probably mattered a lot more. Now, I think it's more about your content, how good your content is, and how engaged your audience is. Because if you have 100,000 followers, but most of them aren't engaging, what's the point in having them? Because Instagram will show your content to people who are engaging in your content. I follow pages that I genuinely like and try and engage with, but I won't see their content for months sometimes, which is a little bit scary. But you really need to be engaging. So that 100,000 is kind of useless. But if you are looking to gain followers, on the other hand, obviously one thing that's worked really well in the last couple of years is video content, reels, the ability to kind of go viral. I think even in the last few months, the Instagram algorithm is really, really favoring reels even more, and there's so much potential to reach an audience that don't follow you already, potentially kind of hundreds of thousands, millions. So then it just comes back to nailing your content strategy and keeping up to date with what is on trend or what could possibly be the next trend is what else I would say. Trying to stay ahead or being an early adopter of some type of trend, some type of trending audio or a content piece that you're providing.
I think you're bang on. I think the only thing that I would add to that is similar to what Catherine said on our LinkedIn episode, is that there is a very small group of people at each of the platform businesses, so whether that's Meta, Instagram, LinkedIn, that actually know what the algorithm does or prioritizes. They've obviously got priorities for the platform in terms of what they are prioritizing and what they're looking at kind of focusing on or upweighting. But there is such a small percentage of people that work at these platforms that know the Instagram or LinkedIn or TikTok algorithm. So I'd be very wary of any businesses that sit there and go,
we know the algorithm.
We can teach you how to hack the algorithm or take advantage of the algorithm or anything like that, because quite honestly, there are some people that work at these platforms that don't know it as well. So, I'd be very, very cautious around throwing the word algorithm around, because I do think that, yes, there are priorities for the business and each platform, and we see those priorities shift and change. We saw Instagram at one point prioritizing long form content. Then it kind of went back to more short form content and focusing on, competing with TikTok. So I do feel as though there is things that we can see that are working and not working, but I would do it based on what's working on your own platform as opposed to what's working on anyone else's platform.
Could you imagine being that person at Instagram?
Yeah.
You know the algorithm.
Yeah.
And you're walking around the office just being like, I know the algorithm. I know the algorithm. Someone asks you, hey, is this going to work, or what's happening with this? Maybe. We're thinking about adding this new feature in. Well, how will it affect the algorithm? How can we incorporate it?
Don't know. Trial and error.
Can't
testing,
tell you.
A/B testing.
The power, I would not be able to deal with that.
I love it.
I'm that person that you have a friend that's like, hey, don't tell anyone, but I have to tell you. And I'm like, well, I can tell Hayley. She doesn't know this person. Hayley doesn't.
Your secrets
Hayley
are not
doesn't
safe
even
with
use
Laura.
Someone doesn't even use Instagram. I can tell them the whole algorithm.
Great.
It's fine.
Amazing. They won't tell anyone else.
Sell it on the side.
I love it. Last thing before we finish up, what is top of mind for you this week?
I thought about this time because I knew you'd ask me. It's an old one that's back top of mind for me.
Okay.
The power of Duolingo's social media.
Yeah, love.
I've just gotten back onto Duolingo at the moment, which is a fun.
What language are you learning?
Italian.
Why?
Learning Italian.
Why are you learning Italian?
It's just a great language. Potentially looking to travel.
Love.
You never know.
Okay.
Just another skill set.
Love it.
Add it into my little tool belt.
I really tried to get more information out of you there, but I failed.
That's another podcast.
Miserably. That's another style of podcast.
That's a whole nother podcast. Tune in.
Yeah.
The late night version.
Love it.
So I just love everyone knows Duolingo kills it on content, specifically on TikTok.
Yep.
The character in the Duolingo parrot, I think it's a parrot, bird, is so powerful. And the fun they have with this character that they've been able to build into this, like, it's a separate brand to Duolingo, really. Like, it's its own little story. And then even I was looking at with Lexi, our coordinator, yesterday. She's like, oh, did you see their April Fool's joke? And I was like, no, I didn't see it. So think about this. April was a while ago. April Fool's was a while ago, and it's still having the power of being talked about. And it was Duolingo on Ice, like Disney on Ice.
Oh my gosh, stop.
And the effort they'd gone to actually have dancers, the Duolingo parrot, doing a little ice routine, and they spin around and all the stars fly at the screen. It says Duolingo on Ice. Believable.
Yeah.
And something they would probably do.
Something you would sign up for.
But the power that people are still talking about this, it wasn't just a brand that said, let's post a couple of funny things. They've doubled down on it. They've grown it. They haven't just been doing what worked once. They're evolving, and they're always thinking about how can we push this further. So I just love it. Shout out Duolingo. Good work.
Love it.
Get you on the podcast one day, maybe.
Absolutely. Any brand manager or social media manager from Duolingo that wants to come and join the podcast, let me know. Top of mind for me this week is probably Fashion Week. Everyone's talking about it. It's funny because I've kind of seen the evolution of Fashion Week, and I just don't know if it hits the same, and I might be cancelled for saying that. But I feel like what once was a kind of really prestigious event that attracted a lot of kind of well-known Australian A-listers is now what I like to call like the influencers Olympics.
Yeah.
It's just how many influencers can be there posting in different outfits, and my feed is flooded. I love going, don't get me wrong. Like, I've been many years in a row, and I love the idea of the fact that it is just the adult version of attacking the dress-up box. But I just don't know whether the brand impact is the same as what it was 5 years ago.
Not at all. I am someone who used to work in fashion PR at one point. Love fashion, love social media. I'm on my phone all the time. And I got asked today, hey, what do you think of the Fashion Week looks? And I actually haven't seen that much.
Yeah.
And that's not because I haven't been on my phone. I'm on my phone all the time. If you know, you know.
Yeah.
But how come I haven't seen anything? Am I not following the right people anymore? Am I not following the type of influencers that are going to these events? I'm really interested to know how me as a young female, probably a core demographic of someone who's buying these clothes, for example, has been left out of this mass flooding is what it used to be.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting one, and I think it's something that I'd kind of want to deep dive on a little bit more, but we don't have time. So if you have any questions that you want answered by us on this couch, leave us a question. If you're listening on Spotify, leave it on the Q&A function below. If you're listening on YouTube, drop it in the comments. You can always send us a DM at topofmind.pod on Instagram or TikTok. And we will see you next week. Before you go, help us grow and reach more people by hitting the subscribe button and leaving us a review.